Pretty good ball game this past Saturday night. Some of you may remember it for a few weeks, and then it'll probably fade off into the ether. But as it stands right now, people are talking still about Ohio State, Notre Dame. And so we will get it cranked up right here at Buckeyes Live. Appreciate everybody being here on an alternate day on a Thursday. And we've got, of course, right next to me, Kevin Noon, Buckeye Huddle, the Big Me Podcast, College Football Playbook. That's the destination right here on YouTube. And you got to catch the tail of the tape as well. Steve Hellwagon down below, Bucknuts 247 Sports, Tony Gerdeman, also Buckeye Huddle. They must be doing something right over there. And it's the Buckeye Weekly Podcast, which was many more times than once a week. And then, of course, we also have the College Football Playbook as well. Guys, we appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much.
All right. Steve, you set for us, or should we move it on here?
I'm here.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll get your take first and foremost. Whether you want to take this from a big picture or whatever it is, what are your initial takes, which, of course, are 4 days ago from this one?
Well, I think as an Ohio State fan, you got to be happy that your team gutted out the win. I think that's the first thing that really kind of comes to mind is, and it's better to learn whatever lessons that there are through a victory as opposed to a defeat. So I think that's probably the number one thing. They live to fight another day, but they're going to have to play much better if they're going to beat the likes of Penn State, Michigan, whoever they might play in a college football playoff. They're just some areas. I think defensively they were outstanding. The defense wore down and gave up a couple long touchdown drives there in the second half, but otherwise was truly outstanding. I think the pass coverage by the secondary was about as good as it could possibly get. Their tight ends made a few plays, but otherwise the defense was outstanding. Offensively, I'm sure we'll get into all the whole Lou Holtz and Ryan Dayflap about toughness and physicality and everything else. But, two ways to look at this. They punched it in at the end of the game when they needed to, and they didn't punch it in when it was 3rd and 1, 3rd and goal at the 1, 4th and goal at the 1, or 4th and 1 at the 11-yard line. They didn't convert any of those three. But the final drive, 15 plays, 65 yards, was one of the great drives in Ohio State history, certainly. To win a game on the road against a top 10 team. There's very few drives that kind of match that. Maybe what Joe Germain did against Arizona State in the 1997 Rose Bowl would be similar. Arch Leister did it against UCLA at the LA Coliseum back in 79, maybe. It was it's very rare to have a game end on a drive like that produces a touchdown that wins the game. And that's exactly what happened on Saturday at Notre Dame as Ohio State got out of there with the 17-14 win. And, you could say Notre Dame outplayed Ohio State. You could say Ohio State outplayed Notre Dame. It was a virtual standoff. We've been sitting here any number of times saying Ohio State outplayed Clemson in 2019 and didn't win the game. And they outplayed Georgia last year in the Peach Bowl semifinal and didn't win the game. Guess what? They won the game. They came away with more points and they won the game. So that's all that matters in the final analysis.
Kevin, your takeaway.
Yeah, we don't talk about the 59 minutes and however many seconds of Holy Buckeye where it wasn't that exciting of a game or whatever. We talk about the Holy Buckeye Pass. I mean, so it's going to be a game that's going to live on forever for fans in terms of coming back and really seemingly snatching victory out of the jaws of defeat the way that they did. I don't know if things are going to be remembered of the smaller minutia, but as Steve put it, there certainly is a lot of concern when it comes down to their 3rd and short, their 4th and short. I think the defense played very well. Maybe there were some moments that the linebackers would like to certainly have back there. Ohio State kept Audric Estime very much in check, in my opinion. Really, we did not see this Sam Hartman that everybody had kind of talked about leading into it. How prolific. I mean, he looked good throwing the ball around, but he only had the one touchdown pass. Ohio State did a pretty good job of locking guys down. Denzel Burke really was not tested in the game, as Notre Dame was not going to have any of that. As we go through it, a lot to still build off of, but you have to imagine that the amount of confidence that so many players coming out of this game, that level has got to be so high. And I think that this open week comes at a really good time because you don't get drunk off of the high of that game and have the risk of a letdown against, a Maryland team that is taking care of everything in front of it. Maybe not the most impressive Maryland team out there, but I think everything fits.
Tony.
Yeah, I think nobody has ever played their best game in a 17-14 win or loss. And that's what this was. And nobody's ever played their best game against a quality, very good opponent. There's going to be some give and take there. I do think Notre Dame gave the game away, but credit Ohio State for taking it. We've seen games that have been tried to be given away by opponents, and it's not taken. But Ohio State made the plays when they had to have them. As Steve said, that drive is going to live forever. And really, there are only a handful of drives that we could even think about. Like JT Barrett against Penn State. Pick a year, I guess, would be in there as well, maybe. But this was, for one, I'll say, just if you ever get a chance to go to a game at Notre Dame, do it. Especially a big game, preferably a big game. If you can, if you have an extra kidney and you feel like you don't need it, go ahead and sell that on the black market and get yourself one ticket, because that's probably all you'll be able to get with that kidney. No offense. But it was a fun game to watch, a game that teams made mistakes, and it's still September, so nobody's going to be perfect at this point. Overall, Ohio State did what they needed to do. As you guys said, it builds confidence. It's an impressive win to win on the road against a top 10 opponent when you didn't play your best game. So I think there's something there as well. They're good enough to do that. And there's still a ton of issues. Yeah. The running game, short yardage. Kyle McCord could have had several interceptions in this game, and he ended up with 0. So a better opponent will be able to capitalize, but this should be the worst that Ohio State plays from this point forward.
That's a really good point. I think that kind of makes it all crystal clear that this needs to be the starting point. Whatever happened prior to this, somewhat immaterial, because it was 3 really poor opponents, and they needed to jump off from here. And they need to take this week to heal up, because that was a rugged physical game. Ohio State didn't substitute really on either side of the ball. They went with basically the same 11 people throughout, with a couple of exceptions here and there. I think for Kyle McCord, this was a coming-of-age type moment, his 5th start. And the last thing I'll say is our photographer, Dan Harker, was speaking to an usher who's worked there for over 20 years, and he said the end of that game was the loudest that usher had heard it for any game at Notre Dame Stadium, and that takes in all the Michigan down to the wire games, all the Clemson down to the wire games, Georgia down to the wire, et cetera, that they've had there in the last 20 years. And he said that it was as loud as it's been. And of course, Notre Dame is dying for a winner. I mean, the era of Lou Holtz and Newt Rockne and Ara Parseghian and all those great coaches and all those great teams and Heisman winners, that all ended in 1993. And, people argue, oh, Notre Dame is this, Notre Dame is that. Well, since 1993, Ohio State's won 13 New Year's Six bowl games and 2 national championships. Notre Dame in each category is 0-0. So, that'll just tell you, how they sensed that their breakthrough moment was there and they didn't get it. So it was quite a scene. I agree with Tony. I hadn't been there since 1996. Everything had changed quite a bit. The stadium didn't used to have so much stuff built around it. There are new buildings all around it, and a lot of things built up there, and very impressive. Everything. The only thing I'll say is when I was walking out back to our car, about a 3/4 of a mile walk, it looked like a war zone. They had apparently the Notre Dame fans are of such class that they just leave their trash everywhere. So I will say that
It was
no trash cans.
It was like a tornado hit Woodstock, and
Yes.
the amount of beer,
Press.
or maybe a country fest, whatever. What Ohio State has, Columbus has those.
Rock on the
trash.
range. Yeah,
There was trash everywhere.
everywhere.
And, just you couldn't drive. I wouldn't recommend driving through that because of all the glass bottles, the mini liquor bottles. I was not taken aback because I'm from Ohio. I was surprised at the level of crassness that we experienced in South Bend, and not unwelcome at all. It wasn't exactly what I had pictured.
Crassness. Can you give us an example?
Well, when we went to grab lunch on Friday at a particular place called the Linebacker Inn, the Linebacker Lounge, you were greeted with the waitress or the bartender yelling, "What's up, effers?" Except using the full language and things like that, and so just stuff like that. And then, of course, like I said, the amount of empty alcohol bottles and cans would make an Ohioan blush, basically.
Was this greeting given to everyone or people that had Ohio State gear on?
Well, we did a piece. Yeah, everyone. We did a Hungry Huddle piece, which is on youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. And if you go and you watch it, you can see the shirt that the waitress is wearing. I mean, they were very nice to us.
Yes.
We got some Notre Dame Guinness glasses to take home. It was, I think it was just kind of the shtick. Anybody who's from Chicago probably knows a place called Ed DeBevick's, where, the shtick is to be kind of surly, but going in, and it was fine. I think that just the air that I got leading up to the game, there was a lot of confidence in the Notre Dame types. I mean, I knew a couple that are like, yeah, I'm not feeling so good about this, but most were, dare I say, kind of Michael Campbell level committed to the Kool-Aid, and that's where we were at.
And those were my two main issues with not all Notre Dame fans, but the unreasonable Notre Dame fans leading up to this. And, for the last 7 months, the ones that guaranteed a win. Now, I would jump on Ohio State fans if I saw that out of Ohio State fans. I think it's just idiotic to guarantee a win. And what is the penalty when your guarantee doesn't come through? What does that look like? So that's just a stupid thing to do, especially against a program that has been decidedly better than you for 30 years. And that's the other point that irritated me over the last 7 months was Notre Dame fans making up all sorts of crazy skewed pockets of information of, for the first 4 minutes of this game over here, we outrushed you by 18 yards or something. Are you kidding me? Notre Dame's had a better record twice in 30 years. It's not even comparable. And this doesn't reflect on you as a person. Detach yourself and your value from your college football team. You can root for a team and say, hey, we're a top 10 team. We haven't been elite for a long, long time. We love our history. All these great things about Notre Dame and its history, but you just haven't been that for 30 years. And that's okay.
But two quick things. 73% of all stats are made up on the spur of the moment. And secondly, talking about guarantees and everything else, I had been pretty vocal in my belief that Ohio State was not only going to win, but win handily. Well, the win happened, the handily not so much. And I was recognized multiple times by Notre Dame types and called out, including with about 3 minutes left in the game or so, when Ohio State could not once again convert a shorty. And I just said, I've seen enough. And I was like, I'm going up to the post-game room to get my shot ready and everything else. And right next to the tunnel, there are a bunch of fans like, you're that Ohio State guy from the podcast. And I mean, but this was about the third time that I'd been called out. So, fortunately, there are a lot of people that seem to be a big fan of the voice of college football, or at least saw bits and pieces enough to call my ass out.
We grabbed pizza at a place Friday night in just off campus there, and just me and Kevin at a kind of a dive bar type place, and two guys come up and they're like, "You're the guy that said Notre Dame is full of nobodies, aren't you?" And Kevin, tries to play it off, but yeah, that's me.
I mean, if I had to stay there another day, I was going to probably need security.
I had no problems. I got in and out under the cloud of darkness and didn't try to go out and do a whole lot. Just kind of, every time we go to places like this, I'm going to go see the sights. I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go do that. And then I end up staying in my hotel room, getting dinner at a place that's not necessarily associated with the university, not walking around campus, and just going to the game, doing my job, and getting the heck out of there. So that's kind of that was what my formula was this time.
Steve,
maybe
my cloud of darkness was Kevin, and so one other thing that Noon did was at the place, the linebacker lounge in you can play touch tunes, so you can play whatever song you want on your phone, like and you can play it on the jukebox. And he's like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to play Hang On Sloopy. And unfortunately, like, he played it, but nobody really recognized it as an Ohio State thing. Then I was going to play I Want to Go Back to Ohio State, but then I was talked out of it by Kevin and Tom, because they were chicken that somebody might get stabbed and it might be them.
Yeah, just make sure you were my collateral damage.
But it was awesome.
You would have played the song, Tony. They would have recognized Kevin from the clips, and then he would have been your
It's like, we need somebody to step forward to volunteer, and everybody takes one step back, and the one guy who's not in on it, it's like, what just happened here? That would have been me.
Well, the big takeaway from this game should be about, I don't know, all sorts of things. McCord's maturity in the clutch, maybe some issues in the interior defense of stopping the run on a couple long drives. There could be the good and the bad. It's all over the place. But the big takeaway, and we don't need to go too long on this, but I just watched the post game, and of course, most of it centered around disrespect. And did that come from multiple sources? This has been floating around for quite some time, of course, in terms of not Ohio State not being a physical team. And then Lou Holtz became the lightning rod for this. And Ryan Day obviously took exception. And, I'll say this one last thing before you guys cut loose, that Ryan Day from day one always appeared to me to have the persona of a very mild-mannered person. But I thought that more came from, I think, him being a coach in the NFL and me just having that thought about him, and just his presence, his look, and it, being of that temperament. But he's really not. He's gotten fired up quite a bit. The first one that hit me was after the 2019 Clemson game. And that's not a criticism. That's just an observation. And so, he went off, of course, after the game. And now his team's going to have to continue to put up.
Well, I'll just say this about Ryan Day. You have to remember, he is a small school point guard and quarterback, and he has that mentality. And he has that mentality behind the scenes, and he's a scrappy guy. But when you are the face of Ohio State, you have to have a different kind of air about you. But then also, this was more than just Lou Holtz. This was not just Lou Holtz saying this. This was a message that was being permeated throughout, and for years as well. I mean, this goes back to, C.J. Stroud, Desmond Howard making a joke at C.J. Stroud's offensive line's expense at the Heisman, and has continued unabated since then, basically talking about Michigan, and it has become the outside identity of what Ohio State is. And when you're the head coach of that, and you see your players being talked about that way, you're going to get angry. Unfortunately, you have to wait for a win over somebody significant to let out that anger. And so that happened this time after the game, because we obviously didn't hear what he had to say on TV, but it was asked again in the post game. And then he said that, this narrative is over now, and it's not over until he beats Michigan. But this was, as he said, it's two bad halves against Michigan, and I would argue it's one bad half against Michigan, maybe two bad fourth quarters against Michigan, and that's what the entire narrative has been built around, on Ohio State being soft, as far as I can tell.
I mean, I think that he wanted to get out and say something, because if you say something over and over and over and over again, does it become canon at some point? Does it become that's what's there? And is that going to be something that's going to follow you into the room in Grapevine, Texas, where the college football playoff committee is making its selections and everything else? And I mean, that it permeates everywhere once you get labeled that. I mean, it's the whole case of like USC having crappy defense under Alex Grinch, which is actually something that is very easy to quantify. But if you sit there and you allow this narrative to stay out there, and you don't do anything either in words or in actions, and honestly, in actions is going to be the best way to get through it. It just seems like, well, then you're soft. I mean, you're not even fighting it at this point. So there's certainly going to be a lot of people who are going to sit there and say that he was whining and kvetching and everything else. But I support it. I mean, I don't think that it was something of where he just completely flew off the handle and it was, it came out of nowhere. I definitely think there was a method to the madness, and he was mad. I'll say that. He was mad.
You're muted.
Yep, I'm muted. I was muted. I actually, my post-game routine anymore is to go to the interview room and watch the last 5 minutes of the game there. That way I'm set up and ready to go. And I can also post my game story, as the clock goes 0-0-0, which it hit 0-0-0 twice this week. So that was a nice touch that they gave us. And I had it all written that Notre Dame was going to win the game. And then when they punched it into the end zone, I had to frantically rewrite the first three paragraphs and explain that no, Ohio State actually won the game. And originally they'd won the game 16-14. And then we found out that there was 1 second left and they had to kick the extra point. I'm a little sketchy on the rules. If there was truly 0-0-0, would they have been compelled to run the extra point regardless? Or was the game, since they had enough points to win it, officially over if they hadn't put the extra second on? I'm not sure about that. But anybody who has an idea on it can speak up, I suppose. But they also had to kick off. And here was an interesting perspective. Kevin, I think you were down there. We hear celebration in the locker room right next door, and we look in there, and there's Keenan Bailey and Jim Knowles and some of the assistant coaches. And somebody said to them, "Hey, guys, the game's not over yet." And they're like, "What?" "Yeah, the game's not over. They put a second back on the clock, and you kicked off out of bounds. So now Notre Dame is
Jim
actually –
Knowles wasn't happy about that.
Yeah, they're actually going to run a play. So now they're having to defend a play without any communication with their defensive coordinator, who had left his headset probably upstairs in the box. And, all's well that ends well. They threw a short pass, 2-3 laterals, a forward lateral, game over. And, Buckeyes get out of there with the 3-point win, 17-14. But my routine is to have the broadcast on my phone. That way I can skis a few comments from the coach or Kyle McCord, whoever they put on live television after the game, in which they put them both on there. And then I also listen to the post-game radio show. So I saw, with whatever the Peacock delay is on my phone, 30-second delay probably, I saw what happened as it unfolded, and him, venting his spleen on to poor Catherine Toppin on NBC. That poor lady, they're doing a Notre Dame broadcast, and the Ohio State coach is taking the greatest living coaching legend in Notre Dame history to the woodshed. I'm sure the producers in the back had to be like, oh my God, we're going to get letters and phone calls. And so he vented his spleen, and I figured, well, maybe he'll just let it go at that. No, he was every bit as unhappy and angry on the radio edition of that with 97.1 in Columbus, and then eventually got to that same boiling point in the post-game press conference. And Jerry Emig, after about 8 minutes, said, we got time for one or two more questions, just one or two more questions. And Day just looked at him and smiled. He says, no, we got plenty of time. So you be the top 10 Notre Dame team on the road at night, they can hold the plane. That plane is not going to take off from South Bend International without Ryan Day on it. Trust me.
So you're telling us that the 10 men on the field debacle for Notre Dame could have been surpassed by the defensive coordinator nowhere to be found while his team is losing the game in historic fashion.
Correct. If they had found a way to hit a hook and ladder or whatever to win that game, which wouldn't put them past them, given what we've seen out of the Iowa State defense last 3 years, then, somebody's head probably would have had to have rolled, but it all worked out. See, in those guys' mind, when he crossed the goal line and the clock says 0, they're like, this is over. There's nothing more for us to do. The game is over. Those guys ran to the elevator, went down the elevator, and ran 50 yards to the locker room, figuring the team would be coming up, or they were going to go through that entrance and down the tunnel onto the field to celebrate. And no, there was nobody coming up the tunnel and that delay took like 4 minutes for them to ascertain, okay, exactly what happened. Okay, so did he cross the plane of the goal line? And what was the timing aspect of that? Somebody must have had a stopwatch and said, okay, snap, goal line, like 1.9. So no, 3 seconds did not elapse. Put 1 second back on the clock, and hell if I know. I haven't stopwatched it yet, but my guess is it's probably right.
The thing is, you knew that was going to be replayed. I don't know why anybody would leave their post at that point, but obviously.
Well, the clock said 0 though, so either way, the game's over. There's not going to be another down.
Nobody's thinking that there's going to be a timing issue as much as they're thinking it's going to be thumbs up or thumbs down on the touchdown.
The clock said 0.
True. Yeah, it's done.
I'm seeing, as the dog's attacking me over here, I'm seeing on here about the point after, and I posted the rule in the chat with what I found from an article somewhere. So take it for what it's worth. You don't. Oh, it's 3 posts or whatever. If a touchdown is scored during a down in which time in the fourth quarter or the fourth period expires, a try shall not be attempted unless the points would affect the outcome of the game. So there's the first of the 3 posts. It was just
that tells
long
you.
so that it carried over. But my point is that people are like, well, they should have taken a knee. Well, I'll tell you which is more likely to happen: a blocked extra point being returned for a touchdown, and okay, we saw a blocked field goal happen at Penn State, returned for a touchdown, or the potential of an absolute bed pooping on like a hook and ladder type play or something like that. I think you absolutely go for kick the extra point, because the chances of it being blocked are we're talking onside kick level or less.
Well, with the extra point, wouldn't they still win 17-16? Wouldn't it just be a 2-point?
No, it would have been.
You only had 16. If they block it and return it, it's 16-16.
Hello. Yeah. Okay.
As my publisher Dan Rubin would say, I was told there would be no math. So
the thing about
nailed that one.
The thing where people are saying you should do this. Ohio State did it the right way because they came out with a victory, and Notre Dame never got close to altering that at the end. So, they kicked the extra point. That was the right decision because it worked. And they kicked it out of bounds. That was the right decision because it worked. So if they should have done this or they should have done that. If you change any of the outcomes, if you watch any Star Wars or Marvel, movies or TV shows, if you change any little outcome, that can spiral out of control. So don't change anything. Just enjoy the win.
Is the biggest concern takeaway from all this that they were protecting a lead and Notre Dame went 96 yards when they were back, needing to go the entire route.
Yeah, you had to feel good when Mirko pinned them back to the 4-yard line because the defense had played great, and you figure they're going to drive 96 yards, and yet they did, and it was a good mix of throwing and running. I thought Notre Dame fell in love with Audric Estime a little bit too much, and for Sam Hartman to have put up such big numbers in the first 4 games for them, and then just kind of be there in this game and not really the focal point of this game. And it wasn't even because Ohio State was sacking him or putting him behind and down in distance. They got okay pressure, but not even really very good pressure, I didn't feel. Notre Dame picked up the blitz package. It seemed like every time Ohio State brought a 5th rusher, or ran a zone blitz, they seemed like they picked it up. So I was somewhat astounded that Sam Hartman didn't have a bigger game, but it kind of goes back to what I said at the onset. I don't have the all 22 tape. Maybe Kevin got a chance to see it in this game, but the coverages from Ohio State had to be out of this world because nobody other than their tight end caught more than 1 pass, I think. I mean, maybe somebody had 2, but I think the tight end had several. One other guy may have had 2, and nobody else caught more than 1. And these were guys that all put up big numbers in the first 4 games. Merriweather, Tyree, Thomas, none of them got off in this game. And I think that's a tribute to what Burke and Hancock and Igbinosun in particular, those 3 guys did. Probably, the top 3 tacklers, I think, were Ransom, Proctor, and Stiles, the safeties. They were great in run support and never let the big play happen. And I think that was part and parcel of how Ohio State won this game, I think.
Seems like every time I see an ISO on Igbinosun, he's got both hands on the guy's shoulders and he's practically ripping him to the turf.
But Jim Knowles has told us he likes that aggressiveness, and he's not going to tell him to do anything differently other than just.
They can't call it every play.
Trust your technique. Yeah, they can't call it every play, and we know that. But yeah, overall, I think defensively, the concern. This was not the best game for the linebackers. They had some issues there, but I also thought Notre Dame did a really, really good job scheming them up and using the tight ends, using the open zones, and just moving the ball. And this is kind of the trade-off when Jim Knowles goes from a high octane, high impact defense that he brought last year to dialing it back a little bit to make it a little bit safer and to require offenses to go down the field. Sometimes they go down the field and it takes a while. And so it's a trade-off that clearly, if you give up 14 points to Notre Dame at home, you should expect to win just about 95% of those games. And so I think this is a positive step forward, even though it is a concern because the defensive line was tired. And if Notre Dame continues to run the ball with their running backs rather than Sam Hartman holding it on one and getting tackled by JT Tuimoloau and then throwing it on another, like if they would have just kept running the ball, I think they win that game, but they didn't. And so they have to kind of own that as well. But yeah, I think there are still concerns defensively, but when you have JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer play the entire game, Tyleik Williams played over 50 snaps for the 2nd week in a row. Like these are unprecedented times, unprecedented numbers for those guys. And yet they still made plays at the end. So credit to them for doing that. But now they'll be dialing it back a little bit or quite a bit now, but it's still something to watch. And I wonder how much of that has to do with, Ohio State's nose tackle is 280 pounds, Mike Hall, like things like that. How much does he wear down? And it's a concern, but if you give up 14 points a game, that would be the best at Ohio State in a while.
Yeah, because one of the keys to this game, I thought, was going to be putting pressure on Hartman. And I guess I go to this well way too often about when are these guys going to show up, Sawyer and JTT. And I know that they have in spots, but consistently for a big game that they're going to just be wreaking havoc in that backfield. And no, it was more like Hartman had time, but hey, they played a zone. If I saw another Notre Dame receiver just run about 4 yards, turn around and go like that, catch the ball, it's going to be like, well, I'm looking up at the scoreboard. It's still on a 0 into the third quarter. And I'm thinking, it seems like they can play pitch and catch all day, but they're not scoring. So I guess it's working.
And I still think this is a good experience overall for the defense and the safeties. I don't think we can say enough good things about the safeties, the way they stepped up and helped out the linebackers who were struggling. They were part of that running attack. But when you give up 176 yards rushing, I think that's a bit of a concern. I don't think anybody expected Notre Dame to rush more yards than they passed. There's enough there to be concerned with, and you'll have to get it fixed by Penn State. And not that Penn State's running the ball well. Michigan's not running the ball exceedingly well right now, but they do a lot of the same things that Notre Dame does. That Notre Dame is going to see how they had success. Like Penn State, Michigan are going to watch to see how Notre Dame had success and say, okay, let's do that. Like when you're watching Notre Dame throw the ball to the tight ends and they're having success, Michigan does that on steroids. So there are some concerns that come out of this game for sure.
Yeah, those prolonged drives. I mean, again, Ohio State trying to get its opponent off the field on third down. I mean, once again, we see that. I don't have the box score in front of me to know what the numbers were for the run of the game, but one of the things I'm going to remember is that Ohio State kept Notre Dame off the board the entire first half and half of the third quarter. I mean, again, when you're looking at a 17-14 game, we're not talking about a ton of scores or anything like that. So there's a lot to like about what the defense did, but I think that it's good to have this game here week 4, have the open week, and be able to go and try some things out before you do draw Penn State, and certainly before you draw Michigan at the end of the season, to have some things maybe available to you because you have faced it. I mean, and it's different with Notre Dame played 5 different backs, but it's not a 1-2 punch the way that Penn State has Allen and Singleton, and the way that Michigan has Corum and Edwards.
Steve, what did you think of so Notre Dame scores that first touchdown? It comes right after Ohio State's touchdown drive where Marvin Harrison gets injured. How much do you think that took out of Ohio State's sails that led to that drive?
Yeah, I mean, Marvin had gone into the tent and they had the ball so long that he went into the tent, and Braden Moles from Buckeye Sports Bulletin was sitting right next to me, and the tent's over here, and he's got his binoculars on the tent for the entire 5 or 6 minutes that, he's in there, and he gets treatment. And the way his leg buckled on the television replay, it looked like this was going to be something serious. And thankfully, it doesn't seem like it is. He went in there, presumably got taped back up again, came out, was jogging down at the far end of the field while the game was going on. And Notre Dame held the ball long enough that he didn't miss a play, which is crazy. And he went back into the game. But I think that that long touchdown drive in Ohio State, I don't think they held it for very long when they got it back. They punted it back to Notre Dame, and Notre Dame had another long touchdown drive, obviously, early in the fourth quarter. And I think the defense was starting to wear down a little bit. And, Notre Dame was just kind of methodically moving it down the field, 6-yard run, 7-yard pass to the tight end, and just kind of methodically moved it down the field and punched it into the end zone a couple times. And you could sense the momentum in the stadium was shifting. I mean, it was, they were being lifted up by their crowd, which was amazing. And they take the lead with 7 or 8 minutes to go in the game. And you're like, oh my goodness, they're going to steal this game. So many Notre Dame games in that stadium over the years, they just find a way to win it. And, Ohio State then turns it over on downs with 4 minutes to go in the game on the 4th and 1 at the 11-yard line. And then Notre Dame picks up a couple first downs, and you're like, oh my gosh, they are one more first down away from salting this thing away. So it almost got away from them, I'll say that, but they were able to pull it out.
Interestingly, between the 2 touchdown drives for Notre Dame, that came the third down completion by Kyle McCord for first down that was eliminated by Josh Fryer's unnecessary roughness on his pancake finishing up a block that happens 25 times a game that got flagged for Ohio State. It happened earlier in the game. Josh Simmons did it. So there's no flag there. And so if there's no penalty there, Ohio State is driving the ball. That happened at the Notre Dame 39.
Yeah,
and so Ohio State was going to have the ball,
I thought it was the right call because he jumped on him with his forearm to the helmet kind of like thing. I mean, they weren't going to call targeting, but I think it was definitely no need for it. The guy's on the ground and the play is going away. I mean, there was no reason to even block that guy.
He's right by the quarterback. I mean, the quarterback is still there. I think I tweeted that if they called this like every time, like Orlando Pace would have accumulated like 135 yards in penalties every game for finishing a block. But it wasn't something that Josh Fryer needed to do, but it's something that we see a lot. Like it was like Davis Nigbinosin getting flagged for shoving somebody out of bounds. It got picked up. It wasn't something he needed to do. Just things like that in this game can cost you, and it almost cost Ohio State. Just that extra aggressiveness that they've been trying to preach to their offensive line. They got it, and it almost cost them the game.
And what about Xavier Johnson? So, first of all, it was a well-designed play. Secondly, it was, at least my response was, oh, yeah, this guy, he shows up out of nowhere. What is he, Robert Ory? He just shows up clutch time. It's, yeah, that was a big play, of course.
Yeah, he must love playing Notre Dame. He had a touchdown last year. He had the big play in this game. I mean, some guys just have that clutch gene, and you like having them. And Ohio State thinks the world of them to put the Block O jersey on them and everything else. But watch out, Georgia, if Ohio State plays Georgia again, since those seem to be the two teams that he has Herculean efforts against.
And the thing I like about that play is Xavier Johnson starts that play in the backfield as the running back, and then Kyle McCord pushes him out to the slot, and there's nobody there to deal with him because they're so worried about Marvin and everybody else. And that's what's going to have to happen the rest of the season as Marvin Harrison is being doubled more than maybe they expected. Not that they didn't expect it, but more than they've seen before. So that's going to leave other guys freer, so they just need to capitalize on that. And they did, even though it ended up being a wasted drive. Because if we want to go back to the whole toughness talk, I already had my column written in my mind after Emeka Egbuka got stopped on that end around. Like, you want to preach toughness, and what you do on 4th and short is you're throwing and you're running your wide receiver to the short side, to the boundary, and an end around. When if you're preaching toughness, but your play calling is telling us that you don't trust your offensive line to get that 1 yard straight ahead. So it's what we're watching is a play caller who doesn't think that his offensive line is tough enough to get that 1 yard straight ahead. And then fortunately for everybody involved with the Ohio State football program, they got the ball back and they went down and won it and got that 1 yard straight ahead. But this was Ryan Day's own doing. And the comments about, being soft or whatever, some of it has to do with the play calling as well, and not just execution. And the execution was an issue because they had 5 attempts running the ball on 3rd or 4th and short, and the only one they got was at the end of the game.
The one that mattered the most.
True.
But then again, they wouldn't have been in that position if they would have been able to get one earlier. And you go round and round with that. And to the Drowsy Dragons question there about rotating guys on the defensive line, it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't, because I have heard through the last several years, I'm sick and tired of Larry Johnson's rotation. I want to see 33 and 44 out there on the biggest plays. Well, the way that this was a fight in a phone booth, every play was a big play. So when are you really going to be able to make the substitutions and I have to go back and watch the game for substitution patterns to see how much Notre Dame was subbing on offense. But did you have an opportunity to fly guys in and out? I don't know based on what kind of tempo Notre Dame ran. I haven't watched it for that type of situation, but I could just hear it now. And I'm not going to name any player specifically because I don't want to drag it to them. But if player X were out there and he was the one that he wasn't JT or Jack, and the play went right through his spot, the howls would be deafening about why wasn't JT or Jack out there at that point. So what's the happy medium, Drowsy? I don't know, but I think we're going to see a couple more games where we're going to see some more rotation, and the hope would be by the time they get to Penn State that there would be less drop off maybe between the ones and the twos, and that at that point you would be able to rotate a little bit more. But this also wasn't a case of Notre Dame having 90 offensive plays or anything like that. I mean, what both teams were in the 60s.
Yeah. There are a lot of message board favorite type guys. And I saw one of the comments on this chat that Carnell Tate needs to be on the field. And that is an interesting take. Certainly, I mean, Fleming doesn't give you a ton of production, but he did catch a pass on 4th down. He does block for everybody else. He does all the little things that they want done. So, if they thought Carnell Tate or Xavier Johnson gave him a better chance to win, then they'd be on the field instead of Fleming. Flip side over on defense on our message board, everyone's all up in arms. They said Chambers didn't play a good game. Well, I don't know if that's true or not. I know that he was isolated and caught in coverage by the tight end on several of the catches, seemed to be in very good position. And on one of the plays, the tight end is like leaning back like this and makes a one-handed grab, and Chambers is draped all over him. I'm like, what do you want him to do? I mean, sometimes you have to tip your cap to the other guy that, they made a play. I didn't see him miss a lot of tackling in the run game to where I could say he didn't play well at linebacker. He and Tommy Eichenberg the week before against Western Kentucky were the two defensive stars of the game, both right around 8 or 9, 10 tackles. And so, everyone wants CJ Hicks to play. As it turned out, Cody Simon actually subbed in for Chambers on, I think, 10 plays. And he was also in the game 5 plays where they had 3 linebackers on the field. So I think that for whatever reason, the way I understand it, Simon subbed in for him on one series in both halves. Maybe that was something by design or where the ball was on the field that they felt, Cody Simon would be more of a physical presence against the run, I suppose. I don't know what the rationale was, but I didn't feel like Chambers played that poorly. And people are like, Hicks needs to play. And, before the season, Noel said, I'm going to turn Hicks loose. I'm going to turn him loose. We got to turn him loose. He's great. 5-star recruit from last year's class out of Kettering Alter. Let's remember those 2 words, Kettering Alter. This wasn't Cincinnati St. Xavier or Cincinnati Moeller. This was Kettering Alter, Division III. And I just wonder if there's been a little bit of an issue making the jump from that caliber of football to the Big Ten for CJ Hicks, because the guy that they were going to turn loose played 11 plays last week against Western Kentucky, a game they led 42-10 at halftime. They're up 32 points at halftime. They won the game by, 53 points, and he got to play 11 plays and didn't play on defense at all in this game. So, people who are clamoring for this guy or that guy, trust me when I tell you, these coaches are making $1 million a year. A lot of the assistants and the head coaches now making 10. If they had anybody who was eligible in uniform who they thought would help them win a game and allow them to keep the job that is now paying them multi-millions of dollars, that person would be playing. Trust me, they are not holding people out who they think are better than the people who they've got on the field.
Put that on a T-shirt, Steve.
Yep.
That entire thing.
The front, back, side, inside of it, because that was a lot. But I agree with every word of it.
It's the Browns quarterback nameplate shirt, but I'm with you.
Folks, attack the opinion, attack the takes here, but don't attack people, or you get put in timeout, regardless of whether you're a member here or not, or contribute $1 or $2.
Anything that
Yakov did as well, though.
anything Jordan Kapler says to me is all in good fun. It's a running joke.
Okay.
So
all right.
he's-
Sorry, Jordan.
he's-
I timed you out. I can't keep track of all the ins and outs of all these various people. People get offended sometimes when I can't remember who they root for. You don't remember I root for Georgia? No, I don't.
My name
Anyway.
is Georgia Dog.
Well, yeah, I'm not too bright either. So you got to take that into account as well. Yakov, we appreciate you being here. Mark, Steve, did game remind you of the Kardiac Kids? Well,
yeah, a little bit. I mean, I'm old
as
enough.
soon as you mention that, it does, but not before
I'm old
that.
enough to remember Brian Sipe and the Kardiac Kids from the early '80s, and I think they made a run. They lost to the Raiders, I think, in one of the AFC playoffs.
1980.
Yeah, bitter loss that was. I don't think it was the championship game. I think it was this, conference semifinals or whatever they called it, divisional round.
Yeah.
But that was one of the best Cleveland Browns teams ever. They didn't even make the championship game. And of course, with Bernie, a few years later, they did make back-to-back championship games. And God, I'd give my right, I don't know what, to to make an AFC championship game and to just look at the Lamar Hunt Trophy one time, to be in the same stadium with a Lamar Hunt Trophy, one time would, Super Bowl. I've kind of given up on that, but I don't know. Hey, we're 2-1, and we got the Ravens this week. Only good Raven is a dead Raven, as we all know. So we'll see.
Yakov, my response will be a little less sentimental, so maybe you should have kept this to Steve. I'm not comparing Ohio State and the Cleveland Browns in any such way. The Cleveland Browns post autogram, Paul Brown, Blanton Collier. So no, those Cleveland Browns teams do not remind me of these Ohio State teams, because they had no prayer, no chance in hell of ever winning a championship. They were getting by a thread. And 11-5 seasons could have been 7-9 seasons, because they really weren't that good. They were good for the Cleveland Browns, but they really weren't that good. On that note, I remember Steve made the comment last week when we were talking about running back distribution that Travion Henderson's in the game, because at any point, if you give him a crease, he can take it to the house. And
boy,
he did. And that made a huge difference, of course, in a 3-point low-scoring game.
Thankfully for their rushing numbers, he broke one big one, because you take that one out, they averaged 2.5 yards an attempt. So it was not much to write home about other than that one play, but they blocked it perfectly. The backside tackle and guard, the oft-maligned Josh Fryer and Matthew Jones came around and just obliterated everybody. And then Marvin Harrison, hit his block on the perimeter, and he was off. He outran the defensive back down the sideline, and that's what speed will do for you if you get it in the open field. And I think that's the challenge for this team and these coaches, is to find ways to get him free.
On that note, let me ask this to the panel here. When I think all the way back through Jim Tressel, I'm not going to take it any back further than that. I always knew what this offense was all about. And it morphed a little bit at different times during Jim Tressel. He actually opened it up at times when he had the wide receiver play, etc. Urban Meyer, you knew what they were all about on offense. And Ryan Day has obviously brought us into another age of Ohio State football. This team, does this offense have an identity at this point?
An identity in that they can't do something yet. Like, yeah, no. In terms of what do they hang their hat on?
Yeah,
third downs, third and long. No, they need they. If you think about what do you expect them if they were playing Penn State this week, would you expect them to rush for more than 120 yards? Because I would.
No. Absolutely not.
And
What Penn State did to Iowa was criminal. 17 rushes, 20 yards. I'm getting ready to go down to NBC4 and do a segment. They held Iowa to 76 yards. Oof.
No, the only criminal there is Brian Ferentz, and that's for thievery.
Yes, he's stealing his money. This will be Exhibit A in the trial of Brian Ferentz on December 5, 2023.
they had like 15 minutes time of possession, 4 first downs.
33 plays. Four
33
first
plays.
downs. Is one that
33
gets me.
plays. I've never heard anything like that. And I'm the guy harping on the clock rules, killing everybody this year.
Clock is rolling.
Ohio State had 8 possessions in this game. I've never seen anything lower than that. And I went back to like 2003, and there are only games with 9 possessions, and that was against option teams and teams that ran the ball 80% of the time. So 8 possessions. That's the clock rule is a real thing, but even more impactful is Brian Ferentz as a play caller.
Yeah, I have that Iowa Penn State game on the DVR, and I'm not sure if I am self-loathing enough to sit down and watch it or not, because I will keep it because I think it'll be good evidence to watch prior to Penn State week of what Penn State is capable of doing. But then you have to remind yourself that Iowa's just wholly incapable.
Yeah. 7:30 this weekend, Saturday night, Michigan State at Iowa.
There's 2 games this week. Michigan State, Iowa, and Illinois, Purdue, both teams one of them will get their first Big Ten win. So there you go.
I think they should make that Michigan State, Iowa game first team to score wins.
Well, it won't be Michigan State, and it won't be Iowa. So
You're discounting
6-4.
You're discounting the pick sixes, Steve.
We
Yeah.
now just go right to the point where we're going to have each team attempt 2-point conversions.
The first offense that scores.
It's the 14th overtime.
It's coin flip it at that point. It's just like deciding the Big Ten champ and the division champ when all of the tiebreakers are even. Let's consider all of these tiebreakers even on this game, and let's just flip a coin.
Gross.
Feeble is as feeble does.
Yeah, it is. For as great as that Penn State defense could be, I'm not going to proclaim them to be great today, but they do have first rounders on every level. Everybody is going to score on them, I'm pretty sure, and gain more than 76 yards. Yeah, you could pick plays out of a hat and produce more yardage than what Iowa did.
And Michigan State, apparently, for 30 days, everybody on the team can put their name in the portal and, preserve their red shirt at this point with only 4 games being played. So I wonder if anybody jumps off the sinking ship and, who they're going to get to take that job. I've argued with people on Twitter. It's still an $8 million a year job. So it's an upgrade for about 94% of the head coaches in the country. So they're going to get somebody, I guarantee you.
Well, they might have to hold some money back just because
they're going to own Melbourne.
Mel Tucker may have left, but I don't think his lawyers are going to give up.
He is not going quietly into the East Lansing night. That is for sure. He is going to get. They're going to have to come to some kind of agreement, I think, to avoid a protracted legal battle. I think.
Yep, that's what all those fancy long 25-page statements are about. I just want to make some settlement.
I'm on record. I'm not 100% sure that they're within their right to do what they did. I really don't think so. I think, if he can prove, beyond a reasonable doubt that this was a prolonged relationship, were there things abnormal about it? Certainly, but doesn't rise to the level of him losing his job, I don't think. But,
does it fall under a morality clause or something like that? I mean, there's
only because we know about it. That's the thing. I mean, it was a private situation to me. I mean, he didn't do anything publicly that, he wasn't out on a street corner doing something like this. This was a private situation between 2 people, and we can't define it because none of us are those 2 people. So.
But a tree could fall in the forest and not make a sound, but the tree still fell. So just because it was discovered doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
He messed up. I'll grant you that. He messed up.
well, absolutely, he messed up. But I tend to agree with you, Steve, in regards to depending on the nature of the contract and what's stated in there about having relations with people under contract with the university and the morality clause and the embarrassment of the school. However, she brought it to light, and if she was in a consensual relationship, which seems to be, you can half prove that by saying if you're staying on the telephone for 30 and 45 minutes, that seems to be somewhat
You're a
consensual.
participant.
All you have to do is click a button.
You're a participant. You're not a harassee. You're a participant.
All right. We will be back, folks, next Wednesday, most likely. Keep those notification bells on. That way you know when we're going live. Kevin Noon is right next to me. He's got the Big Me podcast. He's got Buckeye Huddle. What else is going on, Kevin?
Had to unmute as the dog is barking at one of the cats in the house. So thankfully we're at the end of the show. I already ran my tail of the tape. I did a tail of the tape of Ohio State. I always do that during the open week. Look closer at Ohio State, have my stream of consciousness notes from that. So that went up over at Buckeye Huddle on Wednesday. Give it a look. I will do a Big Me show at some point tomorrow on Friday. Michael, I welcome you to come over there and give me all of your excuses and tell me why it was a Christmas gift, all of that, and look for some apologies from some people too. But on the Big Me kickoff tomorrow afternoon, time to be determined.
Tony.
I've found when you put out a call for apologies, that always works. Everybody come apologize to me and watch them gather in line as they approach you. Yeah, I just wrote about Kyle McCord today. You can check that out at buckeyehuddle.com. Just the interesting juxtaposition of him. He talked yesterday about going home or going wherever, watching the game on TV and still being nervous about how things were going to end as he's watching himself play it. And so I wrote about that and just the interesting experience there. And of course, I have a couple of Buckeye weekly episodes as well. Just did our rewatch of Notre Dame for yesterday. You can find that at all of your podcast platforms of choice.
Steve.
Yep, I thought this was supposed to be an off week where there wouldn't be a whole lot going on, but for some reason, my schedule has been pretty full this week, regardless, and not much R&R. But and actually, I'm kind of dreading that the next 8, possibly 9 weeks will be game weeks and then the last 4 of those will also be basketball and football weeks where I'm juggling about 7 balls with 2 hands. But yeah, enjoying the week and looking forward to get back into it next week with Maryland. And I know Ohio State is making an announcement today about some non-conference opponents, nothing major that we didn't already know in terms of like a Georgia, Alabama, Texas caliber type opponent. I talked to Gene Smith outside the press box there before the game, and everybody knows he's retiring. And I said, Gene, he's a Notre Dame former player, former assistant coach, former administrator there. And he said he had not been back to Notre Dame Stadium since the last time he worked at Notre Dame, whatever that was in the early 80s or late 70s, maybe. I don't even know. And I said, Gene, your living legacy needs to be one more home and home with Notre Dame, set up for like 2038 and 39 or whatever, maybe the 100-year anniversary of the first one in 2035 and 2036 would be cool. And he just smiled and said, nope, I'm done. I'm not, this doesn't involve me anymore. So he's playing out the string, I guess, at this point, but waiting for his successor to be announced once the new president takes over after the first of the year. So my guess is they really do need to sign another one because that was special place to be on Saturday. And you can't bottle that up and have it be much better than that. And of course, last year at Ohio State, same way. So I would look forward to having that happen again about once every 10 or 12 years, I think would be good.
Michael showed up. Michael, good to see you. Thanks for showing up. And Notre Dame's got another big game that could be a bit of a challenge going to Duke of all places.
Screenshot taken.
What's that?
I said screenshot taken of this comment for freezing cold takes.
There it is. That's going to be a big win for Notre Dame. I don't know. They should have a sizable talent and size advantage in this game. But Duke playing its biggest game in how many years? Wow, forever. All right, Buckeyes Live, typically on Wednesday. Again, subscribe and turn on the notifications. And as is mentioned many times in the chat, please hit the like button on the way out. For Kevin, for Tony, for Steve, we will see you next week.